Richard Nixon was born January 9, 1913, and died on April 22, 1994, at the age of 81. He was born and raised in Yorba Linda, California. He married Pat Ryan, who would become the First Lady after Nixon took the oath as our 37th President of the United States. He studied at Whittier College and Duke University School of Law. He was elected to both the House of Representatives and the Senate. The biggest part of Nixon's term in office was the Watergate scandal. This event happened on June 17, 1972. It was a break-in to the Democratic National Committee headquarters at the Watergate office complex in Washington, D.C. The Nixon administration tried to cover up their involvement, but eventually failed. Nixon was later charged with wiretapping Democratic committee phone calls and bugging people who were of suspicion to Nixon.
It's 1972 and living in America isn't as great as it used to be. The war in Vietnam is still going on, the spread of communism is as threatening as ever, and inflation is making prices go up for basically the first time since World War II. Oh well, at least you have a pretty good president. Richard Nixon seems determined to get things done even in the present situation. He created a plan for withdrawing troops from Vietnam, he relaxed tensions with China and the Soviet Union, and he created the Environmental Protection Agency. It's no wonder he wins his re-election campaign in a landslide against Democratic candidate George McGovern. No one seems concerned with the news of a break-in at Democratic headquarters in the Watergate office complex. Two men were concerned, however, Washington Post reporters Carl Bernstein and Bob Woodward. They published a series of articles which eventually implicate Richard Nixon and his team as being involved in the burglary. Their story is made into a book and then later into a movie called All the President's Men. The Senate launches some hearings led by Senator Sam Ervin. They accuse the president of planning and covering up the break-in. During the hearings, it's revealed that Nixon had tape-recorded nearly every conversation while in his office. The Senate committee asked to listen to the tapes, and Nixon declined, citing executive privilege. The bickering goes on for a while until the Supreme Court steps in and says that since Nixon may have committed a crime, executive privilege doesn't apply. So Nixon has to turn the tapes over, and it becomes pretty clear that he was involved in the burglary and generally a bad person, so he resigns. This leads to Gerald Ford becoming president, despite the fact that he was never elected but appointed after Nixon's original vice president resigned. Ford promptly pardons Nixon for whatever he may have done, then loses the war in Vietnam, then loses the election to Jimmy Carter. And that's why today every political scandal ends in gate.
After the Watergate scandal, Nixon resigned to avoid impeachment and to salvage the little dignity and reputation he had left. Nixon's domestic policy included the Family Assistance Program, which provided working and non-working families with an annual income tax.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As you know, the Soviet-American talks on limiting nuclear arms have been deadlocked for over a year. As a result of negotiations involving the highest level of both governments, I am announcing today a significant development in breaking the deadlock. The statement that I shall now read is being issued simultaneously in Moscow and Washington. Washington, 12 o'clock, Moscow, 7 p.m. The governments of the United States and the Soviet Union, after reviewing the course of their talks on the limitation of strategic armaments, have agreed to concentrate this year on working out an agreement for the limitation of the deployment of anti-ballistic missile systems, ABMs. They have also agreed that together with concluding an agreement to limit ABMs, they will agree on certain measures with respect to the limitation of offensive strategic weapons. The two sides are taking this course in the conviction that it will create more favorable conditions for further negotiations to limit all strategic arms. These negotiations will be actively pursued. This agreement is a major step in breaking the stalemate on nuclear arms talks. Intensive negotiations, however, will be required to translate this understanding into a concrete agreement. This statement that I have just read expresses the commitment of the Soviet and American governments at the highest levels to achieve that goal. If we succeed, this joint statement that has been issued today may well be remembered as the beginning of a new era in which all nations will devote more of their energies and their resources, not to the weapons of war, but to the works of peace.
Richard Nixon died at the age of 81 in the peace of his own home. He will always be remembered as the only president to resign from office.